There's quite a lot going on when you look at economies around the world. I mean, I guess a lot of your economic assumptions were based on a gradual recovery. If we do have extra restrictions, or in certain cases even a possible second lockdown in Europe, what does that mean for forecasts?
It basically means that most economists should hire some epidemiologists to help them, because at the end of the day, the lockdowns are very much determining the economic trajectory. So if you go back to, say, February or March of this year, and you think about what we didn't know at that stage and what we should have known, the epidemiology was the most important part of the story, and the lockdown policies were equally incredibly important. So if it turns out that health advisors and so on suggest that we should have either a partial lockdown or a full lockdown, obviously that changes completely the kinds of economic assumptions that people have been making. I mean, bear in mind that most economists have said, well, we gradually unlock, we gradually return to normal, we'll gradually get to a point whereby we'll have some kind of vaccine. But we now know, I think, partly through the experiences of France and Spain, but also increasingly the UK, that even though the infection died away to a degree over the summer, it's coming back pretty rapidly. And under those circumstances, clearly health protocols will change again.
But Stephen, does it also mean that we just need to learn how to live with the virus? And so, does it change actually the compositions of our economies?
Well, I think those things are already changing to a degree. And in fact, one of the things I think Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, is beginning to recognise is that furlough schemes are incredibly blunt instruments. You can certainly keep people at home and effectively pay them as if they were at work. But by doing that, you're not necessarily creating the kinds of signals that will shift resources from one part of the economy to another. So we need more in the way of delivery drivers and fewer in the way of airline pilots, basically. And that sort of thing probably will have to change in the months and years ahead. Of course, guessing what the world looks like after the pandemic is over is tricky. But I think we do now know that you can do things through Zoom that didn't seem to be plausible just a handful of months ago. And as Zoom takes off and other related connections take off, then you can imagine that things like business travel will be much lower in volume in the future than they have been in the recent past.
Stephen King, good morning. Tom Keene in New York. When you talk to your HSBC team, what do they say about the desire to continue income substitution? The United Kingdom clearly has done that better than the United States. Is there ability, given the turning of the pandemic, to continue income support?
Well, it gets increasingly expensive, of course, because the more you do of this, the more you're adding to the budget deficit and basically building up higher levels of government debt. And if I were at the Treasury, I'd be sort of thinking, well, I feel a little bit uneasy about that idea of continuous additions to debt. I suspect what's going to happen is that as the furlough scheme comes to an end, and it will come to an end, I think, by the end of October, there'll be attempts to replace it with something else, perhaps something that is closer to allowing the market to play some kind of role. So one possibility would be to have, we might describe as negative employers' national insurance contributions. In other words, that the government effectively subsidizes employers to bring workers back, to actually having them doing work rather than being furloughed at home. Now, a subsidy means that some people who would otherwise have lost their jobs will keep their jobs, but it will be no guarantee that everyone will keep their jobs, but it will be also a way of signaling that perhaps those who are in the more vulnerable areas, frankly, need to look for opportunities elsewhere, no matter how difficult that might be in the very near term.